Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of the DATT Show. It's November 21st, 2014, and this week we're going to discuss the top four stories from the DATT community, plus a couple of app discussions at the end that Jeremy and I have been reviewing, and we've also opened up the the community to our IRC client. If you want to go to DATT.tv and join us, you can log in as a guest, but we, of course, prefer that you put your name in there so we know who you are. And feel free to make any comments during the show, and Jeremy and I will do our best to answer those questions or input those comments the best we can as the show goes on. So, Jeremy, it's just you and me today.
Yeah, Christy had some unexpected uh, conflict of schedule. So
Yes, and that does happen. Students and stuff.
yes,
So I say let's dive right into it.
I
Um,
agree.
I know that we promised an hour and a half show, and Jeremy and I are going to do our very best to pull it out, and hopefully you enjoy. So let's get started. First story of the day is one that's close to my heart, of course, as you all know from the community. I'm a big 3D printing fan, and I'm also a person who's visually impaired. So when you can combine the two things together, I think that's fantastic. So the storyline is 3D printer that helps blind people see, in quotation marks, and that was brought to us by I reshared it, but it was one of our community members in data, and I have to tell you, I mean, anytime that there's anything that has to do with 3D printing, I'm okay with it. I think that it's a fantastic means of conveying information, in particular for those who are visually impaired. Um, but when we can make someone's life more enriched, I think we should do that. And if you can through printing, then let's do that. It in this particular story, it's not so much about the academics of 3D printing or the actual AutoCAD designs and all of that stuff. This is more of a, they call it in the article, a social experiment, in a way to bring photographs to life for persons who are visually impaired. So kids are at soccer, kicking the soccer ball around, and somebody snaps a great picture of a play in motion. And with this software and a 3D printer, one could print that moment in time and then hand it to a person who's blind so that they can feel the moment in literally meaning feel the moment. Um, I think this is fantastic. I don't know how practical it would be in terms of, say a wedding or a full-on soccer game, say where there's multiple points where you may have snapped a picture and wanted to share the moment. Because from my experience, 3D printing, as fantastic as it is, can be time-consuming. So I think the concept is fantastic. I think that anything to do with 3D printing and accessibility is great. The story that I really liked, and I think we talked about this maybe a couple of weeks ago, was the ability to print 3D Google Maps with the 3D printer. So that a person who's blind could have this plate, and it'd be, the size of, a postcard or bigger if you wanted. And it's an actual raised map that a person can surf around with touch. That kind of stuff I think is it's just really cool.
Yeah,
Desktop 3D printing is coming down in price. I mean, you can buy a MakerBot 2 replicator for under $2,000, and I mean a really good printer or printer scanner combo is going to be 400 or 500 if you buy a really good one. So
and I mean, me and you, Andrew, have had quite a few discussions about 3D printing, and you know, yeah, we're saying it has all these pitfalls, especially this story having all these pitfalls about how usable it will be for the average user and not just some tech head, um, simply because of how much time it will consume. But as the technology increases, and we're seeing it increase in a exponential rate, it seems lately, Um, as it increases, the time that it takes is going to decrease, which is going to make this easier for the average consumer to share moments with their friends, family, um, clients, whatever it may be, to share moments with people who are visually impaired or blind. And I mean, as we've mentioned many, 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 many times on this show, 3D printing is amazing.
Oh, Jeremy, I lost your sound. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Uh-oh. We have lost Jeremy. I can't hear you. Sorry about the dead air. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me, but we're working on it. We're experiencing technical difficulties. All right, so I'm going to keep going, I guess. There's a great video on the link that'll be in the show notes for this particular setup where there's printer printing memories. There you go. I think I can hear you, Jeremy.
Okay, we're
Try.
all
There we
good.
go.
We're back up.
What'd you do?
Somehow my mic got muted.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, can I just finish my thought that I
Yeah, well,
had on
yeah.
the previous story?
Yeah.
Again, guys, sorry for the technical difficulties. Google was doing its thing and not
Actually,
working.
actually, it's more of a Jeremy difficulty, wasn't it?
No, this was definitely a Google
Hmm.
thing. My audio level got adjusted when it shouldn't have. Um, so what I was saying is, as this becomes cheaper, the average consumer will be able to, use it in a, you know, um, easier way. And I think that's where something like this is going to come in.
Think about the moment that your child graduates from high school or university or college, and someone snaps a picture just as they're getting their diploma handed to them. And then you're able to print that moment in time in 3D for a person who's blind or visually impaired, can really bring that particular moment to life. And you can see the excitement in the person's, um, you can see the excitement in the video once the person is handed this moment in time, and they start, using their hands to navigate around it. It's quite fascinating.
Excuse me, my main concern is, and I know me and you have had discussions about this, Andrew, um, how widely is Braille taught? Because me and you both know an individual who is, fairly visually impaired and doesn't know Braille.
I don't know if that's as much a an institutional thing, like as a person's raised as a person with a visual impairment. I know as a person coming up through with a visual impairment, I was told by the time I was 25 that I'd be blind. So the first thing that in Canada, we have something called the National Institute for the Blind. Those folks they pressed me really hard when I got that diagnosis to learn Braille while I could still see, because it's much easier to learn with your vision than without. So I would say it's more of a personal choice than it is a willingness to let go of Braille from an institutional standpoint. So with that being said, to answer your question, yes, Braille is still widely endorsed and used, especially through institutions like the CNIB and the National Federation for the Blind in the U.S. There's definitely a move towards electronic, but still a push on Braille.
Okay. Yeah. And given the, push towards electronic, do you foresee a time where Braille is not going to be used?
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, the computers don't always work, right? But Braille always does. If you have no power, you can still read, but without power, you can't run your computer. So Braille becomes not so much a mainstay for everyday use, but for things that are really important, or you know, documents that you need to keep safe, it's worthwhile having them in Braille.
Okay.
School transcripts, that kind of stuff.
So it's more of like a lifetime document kind of thing where you might want to use something like this, and that's where the picture idea kind of comes in,
That's right. Yeah.
or a map image.
Now, what I foresee is some company. Now, there is mention of a company in China somewhere, Singapore. They're called Pirate 3D. They aim to show how this technology can be used for the visually impaired. My feeling on this is that they're going to be the new Kodak, I guess, of 3D printing. You'll send them your images, the ones you want 3D printed, and for some nominal fee, they'll print them for you and then send them to you in the mail. So you can have those moments without having the printer.
So then the next question would be, sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah.
So then the next question would be, how much would that nominal fee be, and then how long is that process going to take?
Well, if they're doing it a lot, then they're going to be mass producing, which means they can probably crank out stuff pretty quickly. But I guess in the end, the price depends on the machine and the process and how much is being done. But the standard, I think, is so much per inch, like $5 an inch, because when you print with a 3D printer, it comes on a spool, right, and it prints off, and it's like the diameter of your headphone jack.
Okay.
And it comes on a spool, and it's plastic, and it melts. It extrudes this plastic as it pushes it through the printer head, and they charge $5 for an inch of this. So it can be costly, but like I said, if somebody from China is going to do it and they're going to mass produce it, it's probably going to be 50 cents an inch.
I guess my feeling on that is I don't know if mass producing would work, simply because, again, like we were discussing prior, the stuff we talk about is often a niche market, and that's exactly what this would be. It is a niche market.
Yeah, I mean, a picture converted to a 3D image like the one that's in the video, oh my, you're probably talking about $30 or $40 worth of material there. So it would be for things like the moment someone receives their diploma in a graduation ceremony, that winning soccer goal, or that 3-point shot made in the last minutes of the bell before the buzzer goes off. Those are the kinds of things that you're going to send away to be 3D printed. But the 3D printing communities are out there already. You don't have to have the technical expertise. If you want to print a doodad or a widget, you can go to Thingiverse and download the AutoCAD drawings and just print them off. I mean, there's lots of people uploading stuff there, and you can go download that stuff most of the time for free. So I mean, when it comes to special moments like this, it's a lot different. You can. These are very individual things. It's not like you can say, this picture is going to cost you $10 or this picture is going to cost you $30. There's no way for them to know. But I'm
that's
sure
kind
that
of what I'm worried about is the fact that we don't know.
Well, there's going to be probably. I mean, I could see parameters being placed on the size of the image and what the contents can be, and they'll probably say this type of picture with these parameters will cost you $10. And then just do it.
But then that becomes exclusion, right? Which
I'm just talking hypothetical. I mean, in no way is this what somebody's doing. We're just talking about this for the first time. So I'm sure that some entrepreneur out there can figure out a way to make money at producing something like this on the side, even if they're, because there's lots of companies out there that will 3D print stuff for you. You have to pay. So this would be just a bolt-on part of an already existing business. There's no way it could stand alone.
Okay. Well, I guess we could go back to the story that you started to introduce before I interrupted you.
Which one was that?
Story number 2.
Yes. Let me see here. Story number 2. How one boy with autism becomes BFFs with Apple Siri. And this one was shared by me, plus Andrew Daly.
Now, I would like to point out that we originally saw the story on, I believe it was CNN,
Yep,
um, through some web,
through the New York Times.
yeah. Um, but it was a story that was also aired on CNN. And we just instantly thought that this would be a great story to kind of talk about. I don't know what you go on from there.
Well, this isn't really a technology piece as much as it is a different way to look at the use of technology. Siri was designed ultimately by Apple not for persons with disabilities, but for able-bodied people who, just want to be more efficient with their time
More
and
yeah,
productive.
yeah, that's it.
And and there have been, because the technology's come such a long way, other uses for the technology aside from just being able to help someone be efficient. People who have autism, and that's what this young man has, who is in the story. They haven't often have difficulty making social connections and understanding context in social situations and so on and so forth. But in this case, this kid got an iPhone and started talking to Siri on his own and developed a kind of a relationship with the program that is not unlike one you would have with a real person. But the difference is he can test comments without hurting someone's feelings or misunderstanding their context and response. So I think it's really nice. It helps him to understand empathy, and that's something that people with autism, the further end of the spectrum, have real difficulty with Asperger's. So, I think it was a fantastic outlet for him by being able to ask questions like, "You're a really nice computer," and Siri replies, "It's nice to be appreciated." It shows compliment reply, and he does other things like, okay, well,
Also, it's positive reinforcement as well, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Because he can make a mistake and not have to get the
Negative
punishment
response, yeah.
that he would get if he was to say some things to an actual human that didn't know him
Yeah.
or understand him, which I've seen a few times with people with autism. Just the social interaction can be difficult for them depending on their level of functionality, I guess.
Yeah.
And when I first saw this story, first thing I thought of is, who would ever think, who, who would ever think, like, before Siri was created, that it would be used for this purpose?
Uh-huh.
And the answer is, I don't think anybody would think of it.
Oh no.
But
Not even Apple.
it's the idea that, we can create something intended for something else, and we can create something intended for one thing, and it end up doing something completely and utterly amazing for some people that wasn't necessarily what it was intended for.
Which can be the same argument be made for 3D printing.
Yes, but still serve the initial market that it was intended for as well. Mm-hmm. So, hitting two markets, but really only meaning to hit one, which is great for business, but it's also great for the people that use the software or hardware, whatever it may be, whether it's 3D printing or Siri,
Mm-hmm.
To, further their life, whether that be socially or, physically.
Yeah, and I mean, some kids too that have autism, depending on where they are in the spectrum, also are very inquisitive. They ask a lot of questions to the people that they trust, and Siri, when connected to the internet, can do a lot of that. Like, one of the things that he talks about or asks Siri is, what's the plane over my head? And Siri says, I'm checking my sources, and comes back with what airline, what number, what how do you want me to display? Because it can tell exactly who's overhead based on
using the GPS.
Right. So, his mother says, "Why would you need to know that? Why do you need to know what the plane is over your head?" And he said, "Well, I mean, this kid's young, right?" He says, "Well, Mom, how do I know who the people are that I'm waving at if I don't ask?
I like that response.
So, that's the thing, right? I mean, the ability to ask questions about the things around him without concerns for social pressure,
Or
um,
judgment.
or judgment. He can get it done with Siri for the most part. I'm sure that it's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
And I mean, Siri's getting better.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry for putting my finger in my eye. I think that, the more the technology advances, just like anything else, the stabler it's going to get. I think eventually we will get a very inquisitive Siri that hopefully will be able to interpret things more like a person, less like a computer,
Hmm.
but still give that positive reinforcement.
I'd argue Siri does that quite well now.
Yes, but they definitely have some work to do there, right? I mean, in terms of like, instead of just searching Google, have other, you know, sort of responses it can pull out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Google is not the only thing it searches, but instead of just searching databases for a response, it can respond more as a human
You're
would.
talking about artificial intelligence now.
Yes, which is a scary thought, but let's not get into that conspiracy discussion.
Not yet. Not yet. So I think that it's a fantastic way to reutilize technology as not only does it give him new perspective on the world around him, but it also helps him to acclimate to the use of technology, so that when he gets up into the upper grades, into secondary and post-secondary schooling, if he chooses to go that far, um, he can then roll right into the use of other assistive technologies like text-to-speech software and dictation software, all those kinds of things. It's a lot easier when you've had experience with technology in the past.
Yeah, I can speak from experience on that. The fact that, I didn't really use assistive technology until I was heading into my grade 12 year.
Now look at
It,
you.
it was a little harder to adjust, but now that I use it on an everyday basis, I'm finding new ways to use it, and that's, just me as a typical student who's got an interest in assistive technology. So I can imagine how that would impact somebody who, needs that social interaction, um, but their parents want to be protective of them, and not like throw them into the world of judgment, which I think happens a lot when dealing with individuals with uh, things like autism, like in scenarios like that. I guess is what I was trying to say.
I When I was talking about the social conventions, one of the things that I drew out of this article specifically about social convention was, um, his mother overheard him talking to Siri about music, and of course he's quite curt when with his responses. So he says to Siri, "I don't like that kind of music." Gus snapped, and then Siri replied, "You're certainly entitled to your opinion." Siri's politeness reminded Gus what he owed her, or what he owed Siri. "Thank you for that music, though," Gus said. Siri replied, "You don't need to thank me." "Oh yes," Gus added empathetically, "I do."
So it's giving him that responsibility to realize, oh, I just snapped
It's a
at that
it's a
person.
two-way street. Conversation
Yes,
is two ways.
yes.
Yeah.
And Siri is allowing for him to adjust to that in an easier situation. Which, I mean, it's awesome to see.
One of the last things that I'll make mention of from the article is that his use of Siri is hardly isolated to him. Kids who have autism spectrum disorder, um, love to chatter but don't quite understand the rules of the game, which is of course part of social convention, right? You have to be able to understand when you when someone gives you something, you will reciprocate, or you show gratitude. Those kinds of things. Um, it's a fantastic tool for that, and it's not intended. I imagine at some point, some developer somewhere will capture that and create an app.
Yeah, I mean it's a smaller market, much like anything that we talk about,
Yeah.
but I think it's something that would be beneficial.
All the big boys
Um,
are there, as we're going to talk about later. KNFB's there. Kurzweil itself has a showing there with their online service, Firefly,
Although it's not
Inspiration,
that great.
WordQ. They're all there. They're all in the mobile space on the mobile platform. So there's certainly an example for that type of software to exist, because I don't know about you, but it's $200 for ProLoquo for text, and if they can do it and make money at it, then I betcha there's as large a population of people with autism out there and Asperger's, and
That would pay for an app.
that would pay $200 for an app. I'd be happy
Well,
about it.
their parents would pay for it. Let's be honest. But
Right. Yeah.
I think there's, I think like you say, in a few years, maybe not even a few years, we'll see somebody do this. And I just thought of this, but if I'm not mistaken, I read not too long ago that the company that created Siri has left Apple and is now creating another type
The
like
team.
Siri.
The team. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe, who knows where that version ends up, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they've caught on to that. Who knows, right? We don't know.
Yeah. Very good.
So I guess it's time for me to introduce the next story, which is story number 3, of course. It was shared by Tom Snyder, one of our very active members. Oh, by the way, we should make mention, the community is now over 1,000 members, so thank you all.
Yes, thank you very much for that. 1,028.
28? Yeah.
Yeah. We're moving on up.
We would love to do something special for you guys at some point, but we'll have to do a discussion about that, of course.
Yeah.
So, on to the third story. As I mentioned, this story was shared by Tom Snyder, and the story is about a car, actually. It's called the Kangaroo car, which basically what this is it's a sort of wheelchair car hybrid. So basically, we've talked about it a bit on the show before, but if you're in a manual chair or powered chair, you sort of wheel your chair up into the vehicle from the back, and you drive the chair, like, you drive the car from your chair, not with a steering wheel, but with handlebars. And this allows for, easier movement for people who have less hand control, things like that. In my opinion, there are a few downsides with this vehicle, if you want to call it that. One, I believe it's only good for 100 kilometers of driving, so only city driving. And two, the incline rating is not the best. So
What do you know what that is, Jeremy? What the degree of inclination is?
Unfortunately, no, because when I asked, they said, well, you could pay $100 and, get on the pre-order list. I was like, no, I'm good.
Just want to know about it.
Just wanted to know about it.
I'm guessing that anything greater than 30%. When I say 30%, I'm talking about the degree.
Of the
90 degrees would be straight up and down, right? So 30 would be down in here somewhere. Would be pushing.
But that kind of worries me, right? Because if you're in a hilly area,
like Fredericton,
there are some spots that are above that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, on the main campus in UNB would be complicated.
So somebody like me would not be able to use this vehicle in the location that I'm currently at. And I think that's going to limit their market. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't a great product. I'm just saying that given the information that they have released without paying $100, I'm not so sure I'm totally convinced. If I was going to spend the money on a vehicle, I think I'd actually buy a vehicle. You know.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, this kind of a thing is for getting around the city.
Yeah,
If you lived in downtown Toronto, this wouldn't be a car for you because it just wouldn't be able to keep up with the pace of traffic. Like I'm not sure exactly what kind of an urban center
yeah,
it
but
would be useful in.
keep in mind, I believe the company is an Australian company or a New Zealand company.
A lot of flat places there.
So there are a lot of flat places, a lot of cul-de-sac places where everything's kind of close, and not a whole lot of heavy traffic like a place like Toronto or even Fredericton on a rush hour, time. So
Now, was there any mention on there of battery life or anything else? Power, horsepower?
there
Like what? How
was
fast does it go?
I believe it said it went 35
Miles an
miles
hour,
miles an hour.
which would be about 50 kilometers an hour, right?
Yeah, which isn't slow but isn't fast. It's kind of a middle speed. I mean, I know some wheelchairs that can go above that speed,
I've
so
seen them.
I want one. you know, so I mean, there are some uses for it, but given that me and Andrew both live in Canada, that's the other thing. I don't know how good
Might
it
have to
does
put a
in the
set of skis
winter.
on it or a track or something, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know how it would do in winter. So the western side of the world may not get, you know, full use of something like this.
California, places like that where it's warm all the time. Arizona, you probably be okay.
BC maybe.
Yeah, a lot of rain there though.
But I mean, it was an interesting story, and we thank Tom for sharing it. And the the link will be on the show notes.
There's a video there on the page that you're going to link to the show notes
Yes,
that
there
allows a
is.
person to see it actually running.
And to my knowledge, they have not released a price.
No,
Like I said, they said if you wanted to pay $100 to sort of put your name down on a list to get one, um, they'd tell you about the incline. But that was the only way that they were gonna really release that information, which I kind of felt was sketchy. Um, and the fact that there is no price released kind of makes me worry too, because like I said, you can get wheelchairs that go that speed for, I'm assuming, around the same price, because it's going to be in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, and because I think that's the only way they'd be able to make a profit off of it. Now this is all just assumptions, um, but you can get a wheelchair for that price if you had the money that would
yeah,
do everything, if not more,
especially on steep hills.
especially on steep hills
Now
or
you drive
winter.
your chair up and down these steep hills all the time. Like how much time do you get on the battery on that?
Uh, I don't typically push it, but I could probably get 3 days.
So if we could assume that this car would would run at least as well as or as long as a chair.
I think they gave a distance limit, but I think that it would have equaled out to be about a week's worth of driving before
Okay.
you would have had to charge it. Which to me, that's not worth it. I
No.
I would spend the money on a wheelchair that I could get through in any kind of scenario, whether it's snow or incline or rocky terrain or whatever it may be. Since I live in Canada, you just never know.
Yeah.
Um, I think that for me, that's where the money is more better spent. Not saying that's for all. If you're in a European country, you've probably got some flatter ground. This might be the perfect thing for you.
Maybe.
Might be worth checking out.
Yeah. I mean, if you just
Um,
want to be able to go from to the movies get a movie, or you want to be able to get around quickly to do something. You got to go to the grocery store.
Yeah, and that's what it's meant for. Like, because you don't even have to transfer, right? You drive your chair into it, you put your brakes on,
That's
and you're
it.
good to go.
Yeah.
Like, it's very simple to operate.
Is
It's
there any,
very
was there any information on weight restrictions, height restrictions, chair sizes?
no
That'd be
idea.
interesting to know, but I suppose you
Yeah,
probably have to pay the $100 to figure that out.
I will do more research and let you know.
I think it'd be interesting to know. I mean, if it's designed for a 5 foot tall, 100 pound woman in a chair,
I mean, the
that's fine. But I mean, if you've got a 6 foot man who weighs 250 or 300 pounds,
the person that was used in the video seemed to be like an average female,
yeah,
5'4" ish,
yeah,
100 and maybe 20 pounds, like very average kind of person. Chair didn't seem to be too big. I would say it was probably around a 16-inch chair, so very average sizes. And that would be another concern is what if you are a bigger person? What if you are 6 foot,
well,
300 pounds,
that's what
or,
I mean. Even
you know,
a chair can be a specific size, but the way the person sits in the chair and the length and tight, how tall you
is going
are.
to affect it for
Definitely,
sure.
because if you're long in the waist, like your body is taller, so your head may be too
Yeah.
tall just to fit in it. So I'm be curious to know what the restrictions are on that.
Now, also, I'm sure just like any other vehicle, and here's another skeptical point for me, just like any other vehicle, I'm sure it can be modified for a price.
Right.
And those prices can be very expensive. So it's another thing to be mindful when looking at something like this. And as I said before, if I had the money, I would either spend it on a chair or an actual vehicle.
Right.
Just because they can handle the multiple locations and multiple terrain that a place like where I live offers. It's just
Very good.
something to keep in mind, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Very
And,
cool.
and I get the fourth news story that we're going to discuss today before we get into our app discussions and or reviews, however you want to call them, is paralyzed man Derek Feiga. I can't pronounce his last name. Sorry for mispronouncing. Walks again after a pioneering surgery. This was shared by the Ramp people, who I believe are fairly new to our community. So thank you for sharing it
And
for us to
welcome.
talk and welcome for us to talk about on the show. The story is actually very, very intriguing. I watched the video that's on the website a while ago, and I watched it again today, and I'm very impressed with the stuff that this surgery was able to do. Um, Basically, what happened is they took this individual, Derek, and he had a spinal cord injury. So they took some nerve cells from his olfactory nerves, which are the ones we smell with, and they implanted them in the gap that is in his spine from his spinal cord injury. And the reason they did this is because those specific nerves have the ability to regenerate. That's why it's so hard to kill your sense of smell. It's because they can regenerate unless you cause way too much damage. Um,
By over
so
drug use and stuff like that will kill your
yes,
olfactory sensors.
yes. So basically, they took these nerve cells, they implanted them into his spine, and he's been going through rehab, and he's slowly gained sensation of touch and movement in his legs. So he's actually doing physiotherapy now where he's using walking bars to walk, like, slowly, but he's going from not being able to walk to being able to walk again. He's no longer paralyzed. which is just amazing to see. And the video did go on to say that they are going to continue this project, I guess you could call it, by doing a clinical sort of research thing with
Clinical trials, yeah.
clinical trials with 10 more patients who have been paralyzed to see if they get as good of a response as he did when they did it to him.
Hmm.
And their idea is that this will be able to end paralysis, that we will be able to reverse paralysis.
I think that's the biggest step in technology this year. And we've discovered 2 new particles at the CERN Hadron Collider and concluded some very important things about the universe, but I think that this is more important.
Yeah, in the video that's on the site, the head researcher said that to him, this was more important and more exciting than man landing on the moon.
Oh, absolutely.
Which
Certain men couldn't land on the moon without this type of activity.
exactly, but the idea that he was getting at is for the time that was such a great achievement, such
Hugely.
a great technological advancement to be able to do that, and this is head and shoulders above that.
Yeah, I mean, think about
That doesn't even compare.
Think about a person who gets dirt and damages their spinal column in a swimming accident or a car accident, can have be restored. I didn't notice anywhere on here. I know it was in Poland that he had the surgery done, but I didn't notice anything here about how long it took for him to go from surgery to the point where he's standing with the walker.
They didn't state that.
Because I'm just wondering if it's months, if it's years, if it's days, like what?
They did not say that. They did state where a lot of the money came from, which I thought was another interesting story all by itself. A lot of the money for this research came from a chef whose son has a spinal cord injury due to an incident in a pool. So it's private funding, I guess you could say, and they've raised millions for research in this area. The idea is to help cure or reverse his son's spinal cord damage.
Well, if this dude's any proof in the pudding, I mean, hokey diner.
And I mean, we're far from being able to do it for everybody, but this is a giant step.
The question that I have is, does this, and that may be where some research would come in, does this kind of activity stand for not just people who have had a spinal cord injury, but for those who are born with spinal cord deformities or genetic?
That's the thing that I kind of wondered too, is because I know some individuals with spina bifida.
Yeah.
And basically what spina bifida is there's a gap in your spine.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the gap is depending on the severity of spina bifida. So some people have spina bifida but can still walk.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have spina bifida and can't really do anything. So it's I'm wondering if something like this could also benefit people with spina bifida or a disability like spina bifida. I don't know if the research is out there. I would hope that this could be expanded. I couldn't see, because basically the theory behind it is the same. There was a gap in this individual's spine due to his injury, and that's where they implanted the nerve cell. So theoretically, I could see how it would sort of progress.
There's a great diagram on there about how the process in the steps and how the actual surgery took place. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and it sounds like a pretty big ordeal for surgery too. So.
By the way, for anybody that's watching this video and looking at Jeremy's feed there, he films in his dorm on campus here at UNB. It is not,
I tried to fix that.
It is, for the record, not a jail cell.
What? Jail cell? What?
Well, it's just your whole life is right there, man. In a What is it, 16 by 9 frame?
Yeah. Well, I'm a tech geek, so I sit over by my tech corner. I've
That's
got my
right.
I've got
That's
my
right.
PS3 over here. I've got my cell phone over here. My iPad over here on the IRC client.
Hmm.
TV hooked up to my computer over here. You know, I
You got
live
it all
over
set
here.
up. You got it set up perfectly.
Yeah, I'm a tech guy.
You're a tech guy. You're something, all right.
Yeah.
So, last two things to talk about are the apps that we want to review, um,
Slash discuss.
and slash discuss. So, I've got one that I did some reviewing on, and Jeremy has one. The one that I'm doing a review on or discussion about, and I plan on and actually doing a written review because it's been such a long time since I posted anything actually on our DATT.TV blog. But I did the KNFB reader for iPhone. Now, I use this on my iPad and it works just fine, but it's at the moment only available for the iPhone. But for any of you who have been involved with any type of assistive technology for the last 10 or 15 years like I have, you'll know that the KNFB reader's been around for a while. It first came into view way back in the early 2000s, way back, and it was available on something called a phone called the Nokia N82. And in order to be able to get the software installed and get it running on the phone, the person back then had to buy the phone outright and pay for the software. So the whole thing, phone and software included, was $2,500. That was right out of pocket to get it going. And essentially, what the KNFB reader does is it's designed for people who are blind or visually impaired, and it allows you to take a picture of some text, whether it's a label or a textbook or a magazine or a letter from somebody. You can then lay it up flat, take a picture. The software itself, KNFB reader software itself, then optically character recognizes the software, much like its older brother Kurzweil on the computer, and then it reads that extracted text aloud. So, it does a lot of really cool things quickly and easily. It's got some really great features. You can change the reading modes. You can synchronize highlighting with Braille and the high quality output. There's tilt assist, so when you hold your phone over the paper to be scanned or to be pictured, it will tell you if you're tilted or if you're askew on the image verbally, so that if you can't, obviously a person who's blind can't see what they're trying to take a picture of. They know it's relatively close, right below them, but they don't know exactly where they're at in terms of space above the image. So that's one thing that KNFB Reader does a lot better than other pieces of software that you can get, like Scanner Pro, which will also scan in OCR and save as PDF and all those things. But it doesn't do the extra stuff, like the synchronization and text navigation and the ability to do the tilt adjustment. So if you're off kilter or askew, it doesn't do that. So a person who's blind or visually impaired can't use those software. And I think that's probably the key feature for this one, is the viewfinder and tilt assist.
Now, I'm going to be the negative person for this.
Sure.
Because I was in the room when you were discussing with the individual who you had give the trial to give an opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
And he had stated that, yes, the tilt assist is there, but it doesn't tell you by how much. So for a visually impaired individual, it doesn't
They've updated
necessarily
that.
work. Have they updated that since then?
Yes. So that's fixed. Since I sat him up, there's been 2 updates.
Okay.
So
Okay.
a lot of that stuff has been fixed. The other thing that this does that other apps don't is it allows you to import and export documents. So you can import a JPEG or a PDF, and it will OCR it and read it aloud to you. And that's not something that many of the other pieces of software will allow you to do. In multiple pages, you can import a whole textbook, and it'll read the whole thing to you. So
which
once
would
you've
be
done that import and conversion, if you will, the OCR process, you can save it to your device so that you don't have to do that every time you open it, because it can take a while, especially if it's a
just
large
like
document.
the typical Kurzweil can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 5 hours.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's as accurate as I think you're going to find on the marketplace for this. The technology's still in early days. The KNFB reader itself isn't, but the function of it on an iOS device certainly is. And my experience was, and this is why I took it off my machine and let someone else try it, was that with the iPad there's no flash. And the way to improve your accuracy is to have great lighting. And so as a person who's visually impaired, I can use the iPad without having to worry about what kind of lighting is on the image, because I can put it in a position where there's good lighting and it still works. But if you're a person who's visually impaired or blind and you can't tell the difference between dark and light or shadow, no shadow, it's helpful to have some of these cues that you get from tilt and so on.
Yeah, and I would agree completely. When I was there and you were discussing it with the individual, um, one of the main concerns for him, and you say it's been fixed, is the tilt.
Yeah.
And also the price.
Yes.
Because it's $100 app, and for him at that moment, it didn't do good enough to warrant spending the
$100.
$100 on it. If it
Yeah,
was
and that
if
was,
it,
and I think of all the takeaway points that he made, that would probably be the one that stuck with me the most, because it really boils down to this is an economic fact from my school days. Things are only worth what people are willing to pay. And if they say it's worth $100 and a person who's blind and has had a chance to use the software without paying for it
says it's $10, then
said,
it's
if it was $10, I'd buy it and put it on there, no problem, and I'd use it when I could. But he said, paying $100 for an app like this, I expect it to work every time flawlessly, 100% of the time. Now, keeping in mind that he wasn't a big user of the KNFB reader back in the early 2000s when it was $2,500 for the phone and the software, which by comparison is a shadow of this particular. This software is leaps and bounds above the old Kurzweil software. I should say though, it's called the KNFB reader because it's a
collaboration.
a collaboration between Kurzweil Educational Systems, Ray Kurzweil in particular, and the National Federation for the Blind in the U.S. So it's not. I don't know if this app itself is available in every country,
I
but
believe it is only available in the States.
only available in the U.S. at the moment. So for anyone outside of the U.S., I guess you'll have to wait until I do my full review and see some screenshots and so on.
Or create an American iTunes account.
Or create an iTunes account in the U.S. Yes, but we
but
cannot promote.
that may be illegal, so we didn't say that.
We can't promote that kind of activity. So it's up to you to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, no, it's a fantastic piece of software. I like it. It has a long way to go, but it's a lot better than nothing.
I have to say I like the idea of it, and I think cost is going to be a running theme with all the apps that we discuss in this week's episode.
Absolutely.
So do you want to move on to the next apps, Andrew?
Yeah, we might as well.
I'll take the lead on
you're
this
up.
one. Okay.
You're up.
So we said apps as in we only had two, but in reality we have three.
Yeah.
Because the apps that I'm reviewing or discussing were both made by the same company. The company's name is My Voice. I don't have a link in the show notes yet, but there will be one when they get posted. And this company does two apps. One is called Rocket Keys, which is essentially just a keyboard app, but it's a pretty interesting keyboard app because you can customize a keyboard in any way. So if you only use certain keys, you can only put just put those certain keys. If you need some keys bigger, you can make keys bigger. If you need keys smaller, it's completely user customizable, and it's great in that way.
You can break the keyboard down into quadrants too, right?
Yeah, you can do essentially anything with it that you want. It's completely, you can start from scratch and do a complete custom design, or you can modify an already existing keyboard. It's very, very user customizable and fairly easy to use. Um, Sorry, I'm getting stabbed by an earbud here. And it's great, and I like the idea. I could see some uses for it. An individual like me, not so much, because I type with one hand as it is anyway, and I have pretty good function of that one hand. So, for me individually, I didn't get much use out of it. Um, for that main reason, but I could definitely see some uses for it with individuals who had less hand movement, and needed to use like their fists or knuckles to type, because you can make keys bigger. Um, it's great in that way. Another downfall that I found with the app is it is a self-contained app. So you have to do all your typing in this app and then copy and paste whatever you type to wherever it needs to go, whether it's an email or, text document or PDF or whatever it might be. You have to do all your typing in this app. And given the recent release of iOS 8, that was a bit discouraging for me, because you can now use third-party applications. Now, that's not to say that they won't release one. I will actually follow up with for the individual to see if they have any plans of that. Now that
It would kind of. How much is this app, Jeremy? The keys, Rocket Keys.
they are both individually $100.
So I think I know why they're probably not doing the keyboard, like an internal keyboard, because there are lots of great ones out there. The one that jumps to mind is Ginger, and I posted that on the community.
Yes.
And it's a keyboard that has the predictive language. It has a synonyms library. And
Yes, that's another thing that this keyboard app does is predictive language.
Yeah. But so does the iOS keyboard, right? So that's nothing new.
It does it fairly well. It also accesses different databases, I believe, than the Apple keyboard.
Okay.
Because it's not an Apple product, and we know how Apple is with sharing with other companies. Now, there is another downfall to this app. It is only available on iOS, so Apple devices. The fact that it's $100 for me is a bit expensive. I can see uses for it, but I can't see spending $100 because of the recent, introducing of third-party keyboards for Apple.
And there are other companies out there doing something similar, like ProLoquo for text.
But they're not doing the keyboard aspect.
Right.
They own that.
That's more the.
See, that's where the second app is going to come in. Yeah. And that discussion's coming up right after I finish with this one.
So what's the advantage to having this Rocket Keys app?
I guess just the idea of having a completely customizable keyboard for an individual who may need it, bigger keys or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Because me and you both know that there are some individuals who can't use an iPad keyboard because the keys aren't big enough. Because they can't use their finger, they have to use their knuckles. Or something like that, right? And I think that's where this app finds its market. And it's great for them. They found a niche market. They're selling, obviously. It's an interesting app. It was worth testing. I'm glad I got the experience with it. But I can't really recommend it unless you have all-out purpose and you only want to type in that app. that was for me was a big downside to it, is having to copy and paste everything I type, because I'm an individual that doesn't always remember to type things. I get a list of emails that I've got to type, and having to type it in an app and then copy and paste it is adding one more step to something that I already have difficulty remembering to
Well,
do.
that's just the point. I mean, the Rocket Keys statement is that it's designed to for people who have difficulty with what was the phrase, imprecise, unstable or imprecise hands.
Yes.
So by
Um,
having to do things like copy and paste on the iPad, you have to double tap and drag across.
there are certain apps, and I should have said this before I did that spiel. There are certain apps that the the Rocket Keys is able to export to. So like Facebook, or um,
Mail,
I
messages.
believe it can go to mail. I'm not sure about messages. I can't remember, because I didn't use it for messages. I used it for mail and just day-to-day typing.
Are these
Um,
apps? These apps are universal, right?
what do you
iPhone,
mean by
iPad,
universal?
iPhone,
Um,
iPad.
no, let me think about that. The Rocket Keys is only supposed to go on the iPad, I believe.
Okay,
And the next app is universal, if I'm not mistaken.
gotcha.
Let me just check my phone because I believe I still have it installed.
You mean for Rocket Talk?
Yeah, Talk Rocket is one that's available for both, and Rocket Keys is just the iPad.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's a lot of great areas that
and,
I can see
and,
this.
and I think the reason for that is the extra space, the extra screen area on the iPad as opposed to your cell phone, to allow for the customizable keyboard. So, I mean, the fact that it's not interchangeable, you might say, is a downside to it. If you're an individual like you, Andrew, who only uses an iPad, it's not so bad because you have the extra screen space. But if you're an individual who only uses an iPhone, which I would say is probably the majority, um, they can't use this keyboard app, even if they could get benefit from it. Um, Another thing is it's only available on iOS.
Right. Which can
But
be a drawback because there's a lot of Android users out there.
yeah, that worldwide, I believe Android has an 80% market share.
That's significant.
So that is very significant. And I brought this up to the representative when we had our training session with the apps, me and Christy. And he understood our concern.
Uh-huh.
He said that, they looked into it and they felt, after talking to a few developers, and knowing the area in which Apple is in when it comes to accessibility, that it wasn't worth their while to do an Android app because of, how much trouble developers seem to have with Android.
It should also be said too that in November the price is going back up to 129, or is going up to 129. Have till the end until November, end of November, to get it for $99.
Mm. Yeah, and see, we managed to get it for free, which, it's all fine and dandy, but what about the individuals who actually have to pay for it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't recommend this app. I'm sure there are some special cases that it would come in, and in those cases, I'm sure that there's an assistive technologist or an occupational therapist who would see that and see this app and be like, this would be perfect for you.
Yeah.
But as a general enthusiast and somebody who's very interested in assistive technology, I would not recommend it.
I mean, Apple recommends it as a app for special education, but it's a pretty small field, of software, so it's easy for Apple to recommend one if they've only got five, right?
Yes. And in terms of the second app that was also created by the same folks at My Voice, it is called Talk Rocket, and it essentially is an AAC app. Augmentative, what is it, Andrew?
Communication, augmentative communication.
Yeah. Software. Sort of like Stephen Hawkins. Now, I did see some positive things with this app and some potential. Again, it's very customizable. You can create individual groups. If there's things that you talk about more often, you can individually edit, like put your name in on certain things, so you don't have to type it out. It's you can have multiple groups, multiple folders, multiple users. That's something else that I'll touch at the end of the discussion, is their user concept. And it is a great app if you need AAC. It also has its own built-in keyboard. Not really. It uses the Apple keyboard if you need to do individual typing, which I thought was a little strange because they have their own keyboard app. Why not find a way to implement this?
Yeah, I mean it's $129 for each app. I'd pay $200 for one app that does it all. Because that's what I mean. Right now, the only competition that Rocket Talk has is Pro Loco, and there's Pro. So
well,
Pro.
I was getting to this, Andrew.
Oh.
I was getting to this.
Pardon me. Carry on.
I'm not done explaining the app yet.
Oh, okay.
So it's customizable. It's not age restrictive. Like it can be used in any level of education or need. And it's got some very interesting features, again, for those who have limited mobility of their hands. You can get this, instead of, it has this tapping interface where instead of just tapping and you're not seeing where exactly you're tapping, it has this little crosshair that can show up on the location you're trying to tap, and this crosshair can be expanded to be bigger or smaller depending on how much of your hand is covering the screen, so you can see exactly where you're tapping, which I thought was very unique, and not many apps do that. And it's quite responsive. I used my fist for a couple things just to see how responsive it really was, and it seemed to work pretty good. One thing, when we were in the training session, that the representative really seemed to push was the fact that it was not age restrictive and could be used for any situation. They also pushed the way their user accounts are set up, making it great for places like educational institutions, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, universities, to have multiple users for one device. So instead of spending $129 plus the price of having like multiple iPads, you could have like $129 but have like 7 users on that iPad for that app, and each have individual accuracy things, settings and whatnot. And I believe, I'm trying to remember, but I believe it is the same for their other app as well. It all uses the same user accounts, which leads to their online services, which also helps things like educational institutions to be able to modify the app in terms of what things are on the home screen for usage. Now for my negatives of this app, and Andrew touched on one of them already, being that it is $129 at the end of this month, and for me, that was a bit ridiculous for what it can do. We reviewed the ProLocal for Text app a couple months ago now on this show, and many of you enjoyed that review. That app was $200. That app can do everything this app can do, if not more, in a smoother interface. It's basically the Cadillac. So, for me, $70 to make that difference, I would choose Proloquo. If it was a little cheaper, say it was, 50, well, less than 50. Say it was, I'll give them 20. Say they charge $20. I would choose that app over Proloquo because of the price. But since there's only a $70 difference, and Proloquo can do everything that the Talk Rocket app can do, just as easy, if not easier, and possibly do more depending on what the individual needs, it's not worth saving $70, in my opinion. Now, I know that you did a little bit of testing with it, Andrew. Is there anything you would like to add?
Proloquo for text is really good. The two comparisons would be Proloquo for text and the keyboard, Rocket keys, and then there's another app that we did.
No, Rocket keys would not really relate to Proloquo for text, because Proloquo for text was the AAC version from that company. I don't think they had a keyboard version from that company. It was the picture one, Proloquo for text, and then there was a third one.
Proloquo to go, which is picture-based AAC,
and then Proloquo for text, which is text-based
AAC.
What did not have the customizable keyboard,
Would that be the only difference?
And the fact that the Proloquo for text is all in one app, as opposed to with the My Voice people, you have to have two separate apps. One of them is compatible with both iPhone and iPad, and the other one is only compatible with iPad. So that becomes another division in, cost. Oh, one other thing that I did bring up to the representative is when you buy the app, it is only in English. Either one of their apps are only English. To get the French version, you have to pay another $129.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So
that's a killer right there.
If you're bilingual and you need both keyboards per se, or both languages, if you're a businessman or whatever, you have to spend, $300.
It's okay if you live in Ontario, but if you live in New Brunswick, where we're bilingual by law, that could be a problem.
Yeah, and I brought that up to them, and they were like, they weren't very receptive of that idea to make it all in one, to be honest.
Yeah. Well.
Because of the cost of the voices. That's one other thing I didn't mention. Each voice is $4.
That's odd.
I think
we'll have to do some more research on that.
It was either $1.30 per voice, or no, it was $1.99 per voice when I was looking at it. Now, they could have lowered their prices. I'm hoping they did, because that was one thing that I also brought up, was the price of the voices was, if you're somebody that needs multiple voices, and if you're an educational institution, you're going to need multiple voices, because it by default only comes with 2.
Okay.
So
15 with Proloquo for the price for what you pay, you get 96 free natural sounding voices in 15 languages.
Yeah, which is in no way comparable to what you get with the My Voice apps, which is one language
for $129.
2 voices. Yeah. 4 voices. Might be 4 voices.
And the price of Proloquo for text has come down. It's actually $99 right now. And that's the new price. That's not a sale price.
It was $200 when me and you did the review.
That's right.
And we said back then for $200, little high, but
But
does
worth
everything
it.
you need, so therefore worth it. With this app, we're saying, well, at least I'm saying, price is extremely high, not worth, especially now that we know that Proloquo is lower, not worth the cost
No.
for what it can do.
I mean, if you want the Pro Loquo to go, which is the picture-driven AAC, it's 200
And
bucks.
and there
It is
are
200
some
bucks, but
people, yeah, there are some people that are going to need that.
well,
But
non-verbals,
then
non-verbals.
then again, also that's something that the My Voice does kind of have in its corner is the picture side of things is in the same app. So you can type what you want to say, but it also has pictures for the nonverbal individuals, um, which is great, but still, $70 difference. Well, I guess it's more than that now because you had to buy the two different apps. But I would still recommend Proloquo apps over the My Voice apps, and I've been struggling with myself now for the last couple months since I've tested with this apps to be able to say that
Yeah.
because I didn't want to say it um, for a couple reasons, but I think you guys deserve the truth, and my honest opinion is I would buy Proloquo over the My Voice apps. And I
And
and I
that's what we're here to do. We're here to judge.
I'm sure they're business people. They understand the way the world works. Um, and I hope that they make changes based on recommendations that are discussed on this show. And it might actually be worthwhile for both me and you, Andrew, to sort of compose an email
Yep.
explaining. I say me and you because you're better with words in terms of frustrations than I am.
Gotcha.
Um,
So,
so
where are we at?
I guess it's time for the wrap up of the show. Um, like always, guys, you can email us at datshow@gmail.com. You can talk to us on the IRC chat. I'm usually on there when I'm around, which is pretty much 24/7. Who be kidding? And I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Look forward to seeing new stories. Um, keep active, and thank you for reaching over 1,000 members.
Thanks, everyone.
See you in 2 weeks.